Alabama schedules nitrogen gas. Execution for Geoffrey Todd West. September 25, 2025. Holman Correctional Facility, Alabama. At exactly 6 p.m., if the state has its way, Geoffrey Todd West will be strapped down, a mask placed over his face, and nitrogen gas will flow into his lungs until he suffocates to death. This will not be a lethal injection. It will not be a firing squad. This will be Alabama's newest, most controversial method of execution, death by nitrogen hypoxia. And the crime that led to this moment is one of the darkest, coldest murders in Alabama history. We are diving into the chilling story of Geoffrey Todd West, the brutal 1997 execution-style murder of convenience store clerk Margaret Parrish Berry, and the shocking plea for mercy from the victim, his own son, who says he does not want Alabama to kill his mother as murderer. This is the story of a robbery gone wrong, a life stolen for just $250, and a debate that cuts to the heart of justice, revenge, and forgiveness. This is the case of Geoffrey Todd West. Please like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. The night of the murder. It was the night of March 27, 1997, or possibly the early morning hours of March 28th. Harold's Chevron sat along Nakalula Parkway in Attala, Alabama. A small, quiet convenience store. The kind of place where locals grabbed coffee, gas, and late-night cigarettes. Behind the counter that night was 33-year-old Margaret Parrish Berry. She wasn't just an employee. She was a daughter, a mother, and someone who needed the paycheck to help support her family. But unknown to her, Geoffrey Todd West was on his way. West had worked at this same Chevron before. He knew the layout. He knew where the money was kept in a cookie tin behind the counter. And he had told people what he planned to do. He said he wanted to rob the store. And he said something even darker. He would leave no witnesses. Without witnesses. At around midnight, West and his girlfriend pulled into the Chevron parking lot. He was armed with a .45 caliber handgun. Inside, Margaret Berry had no idea death was walking through the door. The next moments were brutal. Prosecutors later reconstructed the scene. West held Margaret at gunpoint. He ordered her to the ground. She lay face down, behind the counter. Then, in an act described as cold, deliberate, and execution style, he pressed the gun to the back of her head and pulled the trigger. The bullet caused instant incapacitation. A rapid death. West grabbed the cookie can. Inside, just $250. That was the price of Margaret Berry's life. And just like that, he fled into the night. The investigation. It could have been the perfect crime. A small-town gas station. No cameras, no witnesses. But investigators got lucky. A Chevron employee, Donna Mitchell, remembered seeing West at the store within 48 hours of the robbery. She gave his name to investigators. That tip led police straight to him. Within just 24 hours of Margaret's murder, authorities had their man, Geoffrey Todd West. He was arrested, charged, and soon his girlfriend who had driven him to the Chevron was arrested too. She eventually pleaded guilty and received 35 years in prison. But West was different. His fate would be decided by a jury. The trial. In 1999, Geoffrey Todd West stood trial for capital murder. The evidence was overwhelming. His intent was clear. He had spoken of his plan to rob the Chevron, to kill the clerk, and to leave no witnesses. The jury deliberated. The verdict, guilty. Then came sentencing. By a vote of 10-2, the jury recommended death. Etowah County Circuit Judge William Cardwell agreed. But even the judge admitted the decision was difficult. Still, his words were chilling. The shooting death was clearly deliberate and intentional, carried out execution style. And so, Geoffrey Todd West was sentenced to die. Life on death row. For more than 2 decades, West sat on Alabama's death row. Appeals were filed, motions denied. Execution dates came and went. But West made one decision early on that would shape his fate. When Alabama introduced nitrogen hypoxia as a method of execution, inmates were given the option to choose it over lethal injection. West was one of those who chose. At the time, the state hadn't even developed procedures. It was a gamble. But by 2024, Alabama carried out the first nitrogen execution in U.S. history. Inmates suffocated to death in front of witnesses. Kenneth Smith, 58, was the first person executed with nitrogen gas. Kenneth Smith, sentenced to death for his role in the 1988 murder-for-hire plot against a preacher's wife, was scheduled to be executed by lethal injection in November 2022, but authorities were unable to locate a vein and were forced to postpone the execution. Proponents claimed it was painless. Opponents called it torture. The Vatican condemned it. International protests erupted. Now, West will be the next name added to that list. The victim's family speaks. For most families of murder victims, the execution of the killer brings closure, but not this time. Margaret Parrish's son, who was just 11 years old when his mother was murdered, has come forward with a shocking request. He does not want Alabama to kill Geoffrey Todd West. In a powerful letter, he wrote, "I don't want the state of Alabama to kill him. That won't bring my mother back. It will only add to the pain I have lived with since the night she was shot. I believe there is a better way." He wants to meet West, to talk, to forgive. I want to tell Mr. West that I forgive him. And I want to ask questions about what happened that night, and about who he is as a man. Through his lawyers, West agreed. Even with weeks left to live, he was willing to sit down with the son of the woman he murdered. But time is running out. The son has begged Governor Kay Ivey to halt the execution. He says, "I know the Attorney General would welcome me at Holman prison to watch as Mr. West is killed. But that is not what I want. When I go to Holman, I want to speak with Mr. West, heart to heart. I want to tell him I forgive him, that my mother forgives him, that God loves him." The debate, the case of Geoffrey Todd West, has reignited the firestorm around the death penalty. Should a man who executed a defenseless store clerk be allowed to live? Or is sparing his life a betrayal of justice? Supporters of the death penalty argue that Margaret Berry's life was worth more than $250, that West deliberately murdered her, and now it's time for him to face the same fate. Opponents argue that nitrogen gas is untested, inhumane, and amounts to state-sanctioned torture. And complicating everything is the voice of the victim's own son begging Alabama not to kill his mother's murderer. The case is no longer just about West. It's about what justice really means. Retribution? Or forgiveness? Conclusion. On September 25th, the state of Alabama plans to strap Geoffrey Todd West into a chair and pump nitrogen into his lungs until he can no longer breathe. The murder of Margaret Parrish Berry was cruel, calculated, and senseless, a life taken for a handful of dollars. But now, 28 years later, the question is not just whether West deserves to die. It's whether Alabama should kill him when the victim's own son is begging for mercy. In the end, this story is about far more than crime and punishment. It's about the fragile line between justice and revenge, and about whether forgiveness can truly exist in the shadow of an execution chamber. September 25th, 2025. Geoffrey Todd West. Execution scheduled.